All right. Are we in here? Did that music work? Did that transition work with the music? I just realized that I could make those transitions, so I thought it'd be cool. Let's go. Goated. Awesome. Nice. Welcome in, book. All you needed. Lizard. Void, I think. Or no, not Void. Gabriel. Welcome in, everyone. How's your guys' week been? Sorry, I've been kind of AFK this week. I'm still a little bit sick. Just been busy with schoolwork and stuff, but so if I'm coughing or sniffing this stream, then that's why. Yeah, how are y'all doing? Wyatt, welcome in. So this is kind of a boring, we could start on something like this, I guess. Something a little bit more entertaining looking than just welcome on a page. Yeah, I'm not really exactly sure what we're going to do today. I'm kind of juggling between building this map out, fleshing out the map, because I know a lot of people have been asking a little bit more for a map. We could just go over some more general lore stuff, questions. Could draw some stuff. Who knows? I'm kind of open for anything. Yeah, we could work more on the Pantheon. I know we spent a long time on that one last time, but I remember the day after the stream or so, we had a lot of people talking about different aspects of it or clarifying some things or, you know, so read through canon requests. That's another one I've thought of. There's been a lot of really good entries that I just haven't had the time to read through yet, that I would love to just pick through, and maybe we just go through a bunch of them together and talk about them and see how they fit in to the world and what we could do. Because I think that'd be really fun. More discussions about the Pantheon. Yeah. Yeah, I've been reading through a few of those. Get this over here. It's probably a bit better. But yeah, let's just give it a minute or so before we get started here. For now, let's just yeah, if there's something you guys want to work on today on stream, let me know. Um, I'll make a poll here in a second, and we can kind of vote on what we think is the best use of our time. Fantasy magic organs. Hmm. Okay, let me get a poll going here. Okay, I'm gonna launch this poll. You can see what you guys feel like doing, since I'm just kind of here for a little while. Figured we'd just do something. I don't have a ton planned. I am hoping if I can get everything going and ready, hopefully this next Tuesday, I believe. Is it Tuesday? Is that the 14th? Let's see here. Or the 28th, not the 14th. Yeah, the 28th, Tuesday. I would love to do a stream and just go over some of the, like chapter 2, maybe, if we have that ready. I know chapter 1 has barely happened. I think we've only had a few entries to chapter 1 for realm events. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 entries. Oh no, 6 entries for realm events. So not a ton there, but I'm not opposed to moving on to chapter 2 at some point. Hopefully next Tuesday, which would introduce kind of more of a Halloween-ish theme, horror-esque. And hopefully if we have the Ignis specs ready, we can launch the Ignis specs, which I think will be really cool. I know I've been hyping it up like crazy, but I'm just excited for it. I think it's a cool addition to the world. Give you guys lots to write about and to, yeah, just to look at and write about everything. Okay, wow. Okay, maps is winning out. We'll do maps for a bit, and then we can revote. So let's do that. Okay, let me get my little board here, dark board. Throw my iPad on it, it'll make it easier to draw. Okie dokie. Would chapter 2 be like Harvest Festival in SpireHelm, where folks are trying to come together after recent tragedies? Oh, that could be a really good idea. Yeah, I could see that being like a, yeah, it's like fall time in the realm, and maybe I would think chapter 2 would happen because chapter 1, let me go to realm events really quickly. Okay, so 4600 is when the death storms start, and 1.2 could technically fall under anything between coming months and years, which does get a little bit broad. But yeah, I think if we did like Halloween started as a harvest festival, so I think it'd be really cool if we did, yeah, like the fall of that year, where this one's on the solstice, so a few months later we could start with chapter 2, and I think chapter 2 would start near the harvest, and then maybe prompt 1 would be something about how the harvest feels this year as opposed to years past. And then we'd obviously talk about the lurkers, which manifest throughout the rest of this age, essentially. It's not like they're only around this one time a year, but because these 2 death storms happened, people are going to be way more familiar with them, or not familiar, but they're going to encounter them way more sooner. Like this is when people are going to first be seeing them. So I think that'd be a pretty cool one to hit. Okay, let's go back to this. Welcome in, Opus. I want the death storms to infect the fields they pass through. So my original idea for death storms was that they would kill everything, but they don't necessarily leave it inhospitable for life. But because of the dark energy that comes from the death storms, they end up getting, they wipe through and kill everything in their path, and then other stuff regrows. And the stuff that regrows, I wouldn't say it's infected necessarily, but it's monstrous growth. So faster, rapid, more aggressive, you know, the typical dark fantasy forest, you know, thorns, vines, all sorts of stuff like that. So okay. Okay, so what are the things? So we need to finalize this map a little bit. We need to get at least enough out there that people have stuff to work on and places to put things. Yeah, it's bare bones right now. It's just what it is. Let me check my layers really quick. So I've got, okay, so this is just everything I was throwing in. That's mountains, that's text. Okay. Mountains, layer 3. Okay, so yeah, my original idea, let me just make a sketch layer. And we'll go to, we'll do like a greenish blue. So obviously, whoa, wrong brush. So got SpireHelm here. That's the capital. The sun shines this way, so it casts the shadow here in the morning, casts the shadow here, and then here in the afternoon, and then this way in the evening. That's kind of how that works. So this is kind of the realm. And obviously we don't have an exact height for SpireHelm. I imagine it's not as tall. Like the top isn't snowy like, at least not in the winter. Maybe it gets snowy, but it's not snowy year round like Everest. Like it's not that tall in elevation. But it is abrupt, like Lonely Mountain style, just shoots straight up out of the ground, and it's just there. Then I have what I would call the stereotypical magical, mystical, dangerous forest. So this is where you would encounter all manner of dangers and villages and communities, whatever, rivers, runoffs, everything. So the rivers would, obviously maybe a small river comes out this way, but for the most part, rivers would run through the forest, down off SpireHelm and kind of wrap around and out. You'd have rivers running probably from here, and they'd all meet up at this big lake. I think whatever this big lake is, we haven't named that. We'll probably go over that on the stream. And then I would imagine that the rivers would go out and flow into like a delta of sorts here by the sea. So then you'd have like obviously hills here, which the hills could have some rivers that go this way or that way. Like there's going to be rivers everywhere. So there is no, I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but in a way, I don't ever want there to be a concrete map that everybody has to know exactly where things go and where they fit, because then that kind of boxes you into knowing everything about the world before you can get writing. And obviously we're going to have a lot of people that are, new forever. Like I don't think there's ever going to be a point where everybody has been here for a long time. So anything that is, like we've said before, we're playing into this archetype, the stereotype of the retro dark fantasy realm. And so everything that you would assume you could find there is what you could find there. We're not going to try to invent some new biome or world type thing to just fill this with, just to be different. In a lot of ways, we're not really trying to be, we're trying to be different in smaller ways, not bigger ways. So like for Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive, they have, I guess they do have storms actually, but they have like the chasms and the scattered plains or whatever they call shattered plains, I think. We're not going to invent anything crazy like that. So there will be the archetypical stuff: forests, lakes, bogs, swamps, hills, plains, deserts, whatnot. But the majority, when I think retro dark fantasy, I'm thinking enchanted forest. Like that's kind of what we think of. Enchanted forest, mountains, rugged terrain. Like that's kind of what I think. So baronies, countries, etc. Define baronies like smaller arms of SpireHelm, would you say? Welcome in, Buzzax. Somebody said small region of desert in the southwest. Yeah, I'd imagine this little chunk over here would be the desert. And obviously we don't have to follow science. I know there's a lot of, astrological and meteorological effects like weather patterns and such. We don't have to worry about that. Once again, it's a fantasy world. The people that are writing, if you want to take that into consideration for your writing, you're more than welcome to. But when it comes to world map, I know not everything's going to be perfect. The stuff we're going to try to avoid is rivers running uphill or in circles and not running like physics, like not obeying the basic laws of physics. But when it comes to like water and atmosphere and, rain cycles and where desert should appear and where different things should appear, I don't think it's too important as long as we have a region that fits different ideas. This is, once again, a mystical realm, so it's controlled by magic, and the weather, as such, we can assume is controlled by magic. There is no tectonic plates under the Titans, maybe, but according to legend, it's the Venerants that brought the Titans up and brought SpireHelm up out of the ground, which is why they are the biggest mountains in the realm. Everything else is a relatively normal mountain. This person making a barony right now. It can get canonized. Like, what do you mean by barony? Like a baron of sorts? like not like a king, but like a lord of kinds. How much do we have on Storm Wardens? A bit, not a ton. It was one of the first things that I added to the lore, um, as far as like the factions of SpireHelm, of like the kingdom go. It's kind of meant to be interpreted by you guys. So like the idea is that they follow the storms and they cleanse or clean or vanquish or kill or dispose of those who are afflicted by the death storms. And so depending on if you're public viewing the Storm Wardens, you might think they're doing good. If you're a Storm Warden, you might think you're doing good, or you might have an opinion that's different. Like it kind of gives you different ways to look at it. But as far as like actual lore written about them, they have a ritual, and they have their kits that they bring with them. So they have like a ritual knife that's made of glass that they bring, that's like in this liquid solution. I don't remember exactly what I named it. But so other than that, there's not a ton. Feudal Lord, but below a governor for barony. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's, as far as kingdoms go, SpireHelm is the kingdom of the realm. Since we're playing into that stereotypical fantasy, there is just the one kingdom and the bad guys, which are danger, monsters, magic, etc. So there's not other like huge kingdoms, but I would 100% imagine that there are people who don't like SpireHelm that are organizing as humans or otherwise. You know, we have thieves guilds. You could have baronies or manors or different places that decide to distance themselves from SpireHelm's authority. As far as countries go, I don't think they would claim territorial land. Like I don't think the entire upper hills would be like, I guess maybe a small portion of it could be, but it wouldn't. It would be more like they own everything that is bordered and guarded by them. They want to own this and they patrol this area often, but SpireHelm's arm also goes all the way around them, and so they're almost like a mini state within SpireHelm. Not like a full state. I don't know how to explain it. Baron is lowest title among nobility. Yeah, a local noble. Yeah. So they could be a baron or a lord for SpireHelm, depending on what you like to call them. And on top of that, they could technically be their own sovereign group, just that they wouldn't ever, be fighting directly against SpireHelm. Like I don't think in the narrative of the overarching world and the realm events, I don't think we'll ever have, at least not in my current vision, not for phase 1. I think if we ever get far enough in the future, we can add some really cool lore and huge world events. But for right now, since we're just building things out, I wouldn't worry too much about like full scale, sieges or anything like that on the country or the kingdom of SpireHelm. I think they'd kind of be their own thing, and they're worried more about the encroaching danger. And obviously their main goal is to go out and find lost knowledge from ages past and whatnot for the archive. So, okay. Other stuff. So, Pompeii Lake City on the border between Titans and the desert, considered for the map. Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah. And so if you guys want to, if people are inventing their own cities and stuff, that's totally cool. Yeah, you guys are more than welcome to kind of design, develop, if you want volcanoes, like somebody said, yeah, there's like a volcano over here that's got its own little city, Pompeii type thing, that's over here kind of near the desert and the Titans. I'm totally fine with that. I don't think that needs to be necessarily canonized, because if we can, or not a city, a town, yeah. If it makes sense in the world, then it's truth. We don't, canon is stuff that needs to be, overarching. Like if we were to add a huge lake somewhere or something, I think the volcano we could definitely canonize, like the volcano specifically, and then if people want to develop their own villages around it, I think that would totally work. I didn't originally envision each of the peaks having a name. I think that'd be a little too complicated. But if we needed one volcano, one or two volcanoes, like one up here and one down here, I don't see that being problematic at all. So, merfolk in the lake, that would be really cool. Yeah, imagine you have merfolk that are in the ocean, like your sirens and mermaids, like of typical fantasy that like lure you into the ocean. And then you have the merfolk of the lake that are maybe more peaceful, or maybe not, I don't know. And then you have a full culture in between, like you kind of have a gradient of, saltwater mer people and then freshwater mer people, and then everything kind of in between. Like they could venture up and down the river, or they could fight in these rivers. Like I imagine this river, I mean, it's not even on the map yet, but I imagine that one's pretty big. I'm trying to think of big rivers, not like the Amazon, but I'm trying to think of like deep rivers. So yeah, Northern Volcano could have a snow cap. Yeah. Yeah, this is originally Iceland, like not literally Iceland, but like this is an ice place up here. I imagine this is like a plateau that's just cold. So there's kind of like, you know, these cliffs that you could scale up with ice or rock, depending on the season and what, you know, which part you're going up. And then on top would kind of be that typical tundra, if you really wanted something like that. And then beyond, who knows what's beyond this place. Freshwaters are horrifying, the saltwaters are peaceful. Yeah, that could be cool. Flatlands, plains, maybe in the north, west of the hills. Yeah, so let's just, let me just make this lighter. And then let's go in here. I think that's the right color. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the forest. So maybe let's just sketch for a minute and figure out where we're going to put everything. So we've got the typical forest. We're going to have a big lake of sorts. We're going to have a big river that flows out into a delta. We're going to have a volcano here-ish, and probably another volcano up here. A shoreline where the sea looks red at dusk. Dusk is morning, right? Dawn is evening. Am I getting that confused? Oh no, dusk is when it's beginning to get dark. So in that case, the entire realm is always red at dusk because the smoke and clouds and whatnot beyond the Titans are all red. So the entire realm is always like deep, vibrant red at nighttime. So I'd imagine the entire shore would see that as well. Like every time the sun sets, it becomes like a bright red ball that you could probably even look directly at because it's so thick behind the Titans of clouds. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Where are the volcanoes? I can't see them. Oh yeah, Volcano 1 and I think Volcano 2. It's a little bit boring, but I think it kind of works. And if people want to add more volcanoes in here, I would imagine these Titans would be the most ruthless volcanic, you know, stereotypically it's Mordor essentially. Like that's kind of the closest thing we've got to it. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Just not that it's going to be like its own little place. Top and bottom of the Titans. Means an ancient tower split in two by the first Death Storm. That's an idea. I like that idea. I don't know. I imagine the Death Storms are more about, well, I guess I don't know if it could split a tower. It'd be interesting. Or maybe two towers that were connected by a wall that then like was broken through by the Death Storm. I imagine the Death Storms are pretty big. Like tornado. I think of it like a sideways tornado in a lot of ways. Like it just kind of spirals and chooses its random path and eventually dissipates. Is there a country in real life that sounds about the size of SpireHelm for scale? There is not, but it's small. Like this is a realm and a kingdom, so in a lot of ways, it represents just a small bit. And if you're thinking medieval fantasy, obviously I love the medieval era, but there is a lot that has been derived from it to make fantasy that I think takes everything way out of proportion, but that's where the fun is. But in a lot of ways, I think we can stay grounded in what was real. And I think in medieval fantasy, your whole world to you, like most villagers didn't travel more than 10 miles in their entire lives, I think is the stat, or maybe 5 miles or so. So like for the majority of the people in the realm, for the majority of the Spire folk, according to, who was it that I just pinned? Midnight, I think, in the Discord, is the one who coined the term Spire folk in his Stormwarden journals. I really like that name. But for the majority of them, they don't even leave their town. Like the collectors and the people of the archive and the heroes and adventurers of the realm are the only people that could even potentially go from one end of the map to the other. So to them, this is their whole world. But in reality, it's pretty small. Like it's not huge, but it's also big enough to store everything that we need here. Like I imagine it's very dense when it comes to things you could encounter. It's not vast and open. Like Lord of the Rings has a lot of expansive space. I imagine this is like jam-packed with stuff. There's always stuff. Even like obviously the towns aren't everywhere. It's not like a metropolis, but there is always things between one town and another. It's probably not just going to be expanse. It's probably going to be forest, bog, monsters, creatures, whatnot. Most travel is done by horseback. Yeah, either horseback, other sort of mount, or by foot. Although since this new advent of the death storms, the overgrowth is making it harder for roads to be maintained. And so maybe that's something we should go over is there's probably a road that follows along the river here. Like if that's, I don't know, like a bridge here, a bridge here, a bridge here, a bridge here, whatever. There's probably a road that follows along the river through here, but I imagine that's probably like the only main road that's actually maintained. Like there might not be, maybe one to the sea as well, like over here. There might be some roads, and this is where like they'd have some ports for like fishing and stuff, or for trade with other towns up the coast. I imagine we're not doing anything that way. We're not going to other continents. We're not going to other places. So for now, we're just sticking to what's here in the realm. But other than that, I think the roads are pretty much like trails at this point, or pretty dense, or they end randomly because of things that are just overgrowth that's happening. So where are we going with this? Highly magical world that most people will have seen many magical things happen in their lives. Yeah, I think the access to magic is limited and mystic. Like it's not forbidden, but it's hard to come across. But people believe in magic because they've seen things about magic. So you might have a local, like each town might have one or two magic users in it, like an old mage or an alchemist or a benediction. A lot of people might practice benediction. So if they worship a god, you might have a cleric in your town that can help you pray or find peace or send those who are dying into the afterlife, etc. But it's not like everybody uses magic. It's just everybody knows, oh yeah, there's a guy who uses magic over here. I've seen a mage in my life and he's okay. And then throughout the realm, in more the higher power, how do we put this? The more powerful the magic, the more rare it is. I think is kind of how we've set it up. So it's kind of like an exponential curve where the really powerful magic people are hard to find and probably don't interact with society much. Like your typical wizard in a tower is like, once again, we're going for the stereotypical dark fantasy. And so that's like one of those things. And when you think of dark fantasy, you think of wizard, like, oh yeah, he's the guy out in the forest. And if people in a town need his help, they'll go out there and find him or try to, and maybe get lost on the way. Like that's kind of how that works. Is magic innate or can you learn it like math? Yeah, I know somebody just mentioned it's in the Master Lore doc. I can pull it up really quick. The Forces of Mysticism section. So depending on the type of magic is where your magic comes from. I should clarify. Each of the orders of magic is broken up by where the source of their power comes from. So for wizardry, it's learned. For sorcery, it feeds off of ancestors' memories, the unseen. Arcanism is mana within and like the innate laws of magic or laws of reality and the cosmos. Benediction power comes from the gods. Druidcraft comes from life and nature. Hematurgy comes from the parasitic life, so taking life from others, blood, life essence, necromancy. Alchemy comes from combinations and science and experimentation. And then anathergy comes from banished gods or exiled gods. So it's basically benediction, but it's like dark benediction, essentially. But the archive would classify it as anathergy since it's different than the venerants or the minor gods or etc. So
For the average archivist, magic would be a daily occurrence. For the average person, not so much. Yeah, I think so. And I think the city of SpireHelm would have access to um, more magic, like more wizardry, maybe, and definitely a lot more benediction than others. Like the archive is kind of a magical place in a lot of ways. Um, and so you would, and they bring a lot of the artifacts there. So you would see and encounter a lot of magic in your day-to-day life if you're in the archive or if you're in the throne room or whatnot in the actual capital. But for the random folk, yeah, I don't think they would probably would not see much in their day-to-day life. How did I add the Gray Spirehelm logo? I want to say it's a watermark. I think you go format, no, insert page elements, watermark, and then I added that. So yeah, I think I put the PNG somewhere in the Discord for those who wanted to use it. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, so Magic Forest, lake, whoops, obviously the river. Okay, and then I think these are like the mountains up here are kind of the plains. Well, I don't know, hills. And then plains, and I think plains up here. So that's kind of the plains. I imagine these plains over here are kind of the highlands of like Norway, you know, like in Ragnarok where Loki and Thor go to meet Odin at the when like Hela comes and like breaks Mjolnir or whatever. I imagine that's kind of up here. Like these little bits are kind of fjords maybe, and you know inlets, and then at the top there's just these, excuse me, highland plains. And then these plains would kind of be more like Rohan, rolling hills, plains, farms, Wyoming, you know, Midwest U.S. kind of plains. And then I imagine we get another really dense set of forests through here that are accompanied by mountains again. So these mountains are not as big as the Titans, but these are the Rockies, you know, Colorado, Utah, the Sierra Nevadas, Montana, that kind of Alaska almost, like once you get up to here. And then they kind of merge into the Titans here. Then here we've got a little bit of desert. And I think the desert could kind of transition from like your Monument Valley up here, Monument Valley, down to like Sahara down here. So you'd kind of get both sides of like a little bit more, like if you want to make slot canyons and rolling sandstone, you could have that bit kind of up in there. And if you wanted just like flat desert forever, like your traditional like dune, excuse me, then you have that down at the bottom. And then I guess that just leaves kind of this section here, figure out what to do with. I mean, imagine this kind of forest that trickles out into the plains here. Like this would kind of be, this type of forest would kind of be more Appalachia, as opposed to this forest being more Wasatch-like or Rockies. So Rockies, Appalachia. And then within each of these, like imagine this forest has the swamps, you know, within it, the bogs, the typical fantasy stuff. Like this is the typical forest, and it's kind of a combination of all forests in a way. Okay, sorry, I'm just reading through chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, any ideas of what to do with this last little section over here? Is there a biome I'm missing of some kind? that we think is really important. Tundra, plains, lake, forest, desert. Savanna and jungle. Yeah, I feel like jungle gets a little further outside of the stereotypical fantasy. Swamp. It could be cool to have this section, like say there's, I don't know, less mountains right here. And so it kind of cuts through and you get this trickle of, sorry for the alarms. I don't know if you guys can hear the sirens, but they're going past. If you get like this trickle of the essence from the lands of exile that seep into the land and kind of dissipate. So not like a death storm specifically, but kind of a little bit like that, where the whole realm feels like a spooky graveyard kind of idea, you know? Like this, it's almost, it's kind of desert, but not because it's a dry place, but because everything kind of just dies there. Mire, Marsh, Everglades. I feel like the Everglades jungle kind of could fit somewhere down there. Graveyard the size of an entire biome would be interesting if done right. Yeah, could be cool. We're gonna do some heretical things really quick. We're gonna go on Pinterest and just look at some inspiration from probably AI art. But just for vibes, because AI is really good at vibes, that's one thing for sure. But yeah, kind of like, I mean, this is actually a really good picture. This is kind of the color I imagine for the Death Storms and whatnot. If those were quote unquote the Titans back there, you'd have these, I don't know, this seemed a little grown with plains and stuff. But something kind of like this, where it's like, it's not a desert, but it's kind of just dead. It feels like everything there is just dying. Oh yeah, I know they do have the AI setting. I've seen that. I haven't turned it on yet. I love this one, by the way. I know this is probably also AI, but I need to make a piece like this. Super cool. Like a Shelob of the Titans kind of thing. But yeah, maybe just kind of this vibe, your spooky, dark fantasy. There's a little bit of growth. There are trees, but they're all kind of dead. And maybe it's, maybe, hear me out. We do this thing where the Titans have this chunk taken out of them, and they've kind of rolled into the land. Goodness. Excuse me. Just toward all this region. Yeah, it could definitely have a bog there. Yeah, bog, Greenland, coastal volcanoes. Yeah, have a good one, Hassar. Thanks for hopping in. So yeah, I imagine there's like, it's not like mountains, but they're like rocks that have kind of tumbled out. And so you get this mix of swamp, bog, fog, you know, you get this ever-present fog that kind of seeps out from between the Death Storms, or the Death Storms, the Titans, and you can kind of see behind the Titans a little bit. Like you can see further in than most, and there's kind of like this valley that you can't even see the bottom because it's just fog that just seeps out. So yeah, I think that would be a pretty good idea for this place. We probably need to name this place specifically, because just calling it the bog is probably not going to be enough. Is Vermis? Love Vermis. Great aesthetic. Okay, so let's hop back to here. Oh, I didn't even, yeah, I was on the wrong thing. Okay, so this one, yeah, big giant boulders, not exactly mountains, but like a really rocky area. Giant, just huge, gargantuan rocks. And between them, you have these little bogs, swamps, and then you have like this ever-present fog, kind of this feeling of doom and gloom and death. And then And then yeah, you have like all the dark wizards and towers and like your typical like all the stuff we were just looking at. You have the giant towers with the skulls on the top and everything like that that fits into this bog place that we would probably need to name. Deathstorm Marshes could be good. I like the marshes. Rocky Area could have a steep drop off to the desert, sort of acting like a natural wall. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, there could be kind of like a chunk here. Okay, let me actually pull up Tolkien map because I really like the vibes of a Tolkien map. Obviously, it's very archetypical fantasy. The one from The Hobbit is actually really cool too because it's not super specific. And that's the other thing here. I know we all want a perfectly scaled map that shows everything as it truly is in 100% detail and numbered and labeled everything. But the vibe we're going for here is that this is an ever-changing realm, and so we know of these regions, and you might not know how to even get there. You might just stumble upon it. So it's like you might not know where, you might think you're going towards these Rocky Mountains up towards the north over here, and then you might just stumble into the Deathstorm Marshes, the Dead Marsh, yeah, the bog, that kind of area. And you would think, oh, I'm kind of heading in the right direction. I don't know what this place is. And then you get far enough in, you go, oh, I know where I am. I've heard stories of this place based on the descriptions. And I think that's more important than having a one-to-one scale map because this is a realm of myth, and you know, it's mythic in nature, which means it's not 100% true. There is almost the reality is bent to the will of magic powers at bay or that control the realm. The Venerants, obviously the Dark One has a ton of influence that's spreading now. So Dwarves Castle. Desert area is like a reverse plateau. Yeah, it can kind of drop down into a desert. I think that'd be kind of cool. Okay. So I don't dislike the Tolkien forests, but I don't love the Tolkien aesthetic of forests. I'm gonna pop this back up here. The bunch of little circles, I'm not opposed to it. I don't love it. I love the mountains in the Tolkien maps. I think these were done by Christopher Tolkien, if I'm not wrong, by J.R.R. Tolkien's son. Someone could correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's who did these maps. I like the dotted lines for roads. That's also just a lot of detail to put in, which I could take my time and do them. We have lots of people who are eager to make maps for the realm to begin with, so I'm not too scared of that. I like this one in a lot of ways just because it's so like not to scale. It just has like the mountain and then a river and then the long lake. Like you can't even see Lake Town from here. I don't know. I like these maps. They feel very esoteric in a way, which is kind of cool. Okay, so that's kind of the Shire. It's a little bit smaller. Okay, this one's a little bit different. Not opposed. Let's see. Whoops. Hand-drawn fantasy map. Let's see what this pulls up. Yeah, like this is what I imagine people in the realm have access to. Like these are the maps that people see. They just see like kingdom here, tower here, mountains here, follow the road. I mean, this one's obviously made for like this format, but in a lot of ways, I don't think they get a lot of detail at all. Like it'll feel very, the maps that they have access to that you guys can be drawing for your stories and stuff should be as, not like as unusable as possible, but in a lot of ways, like kind of unusable. I think it adds to the world. I don't think it detracts from it. Oh, this one's kind of cool. I like these forests a little bit better than Tolkien's, although we could do just a full Tolkien style map. Hold some remnants of the same civilization as the abandoned underground cities. That could be cool. Do you like that? Whoa. This has got to be with an app, right? There's no way they hand drew this. This is crazy. Holy cow. Way outside of the scope of what we're doing here. This is humongousaurus. This works when you're writing a fantasy world yourself, but for collaborative stuff, it's just going to be too hard to do. And I think the fantasy of the the retro dark fantasy that we're going for, the shared fantasy is that the realm is small and there's a kingdom to protect. Not so much that there are feudal kingdoms that are fighting each other and vying for power. So, but I do like, I mean, if we were to take this little section right here of Valyris, I think there's a lot of really good stuff there. So, could be cool. Oh, there's Middle Earth again. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of just like browsing stuff right now. But I like the style of this one. Let me make a new maps. That one's good. Oh my gosh, of course it's an ad. Everything I click on Pinterest. Okay, last thing we'll search is, wow, I'm missing the keys. Trying to think of how we can stylistically, like I want people to be able to see this map and know the vibe of the project we're going for. I don't want them to be like, oh, is this like a high fantasy map or a low fantasy map? I want them to see it and go, I know exactly what the vibe is here. I like this one a lot. It's a smaller map, it's a hex map, but could be cool. This one's really, really good. Okay. Okay, well I'll keep looking through some of those. As far as what we're gonna do on stream, I think I'll work on this map kind of by myself, like as far as like rendering it and getting everything drawn. Just because that'll take a while and I think it'd be kind of boring to do on stream. I think there's probably better uses of our time here, but what we could do is obviously name specific parts of the realm. Let's start first with the bog area. I'm just gonna run a poll maybe, or if you guys just have any ideas for what we could call it, let me know. I really like the somebody called it the Dead Marshes. Yeah, the Dead Marshes. Trying to think of other Deathstorm marshes could be cool, although the Deathstorms can come from anywhere along the Titans, not specifically there. Let's see. The Dread Marsh feels more punchy. Yeah, I agree. And it should feel like Dread. Um, hmm. Silent slow. Slew? I think it's slew, actually. Could be a good one. Yeah, I guess for now we could just call it the Dead Marshes or the Dread Marsh. A rough farmer talking about them and seeing how they would sound. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think because of that, there's so much in the world that oh sorry, I'm saving this really quick. Um Colloquially, like there is no internet, there is no way to reference and find maps other than the maps that the archive might have, and if you can combine them together and piece together the land and the realm, then you can do that. But for the majority of people, they don't refer to things by what they can Google online. They refer to it by what they would know it as. And so I think in a lot of ways the Dread Marsh works because we don't need any esoteric or in language name for specific places because they are just, it's just the Dread Marsh or the Dread Marsh of blank blank blank. Like if they have an official name for it, it's probably the Dread Marsh of blank because that is what it's colloquially known as, and so there's no reason to call it, you know, some fantasy name. I don't think, at least, because the majority of people that we're writing about and the majority of records that we're going to find and bring to the archive are going to be written from the perspective of someone who knows it as the Dread Marsh and nothing else. Exactly, Opus. Okay. So now let's make this one lower. Let's do that, and let me go to, excuse me. Okay, yeah, I think that's a good place to at least be done with the map section. I think I'll obviously work on it in my own time as much as I can, but I think that's a pretty fair place to leave it. Unless we want to name the different forests and other mountain ranges. We obviously have the Titans, we've got the Dread Marsh, we've got the desert. I don't know, do those names just sound too topical? Like, do we need something that sounds more like they are named? Would the forest around SpireHelm have a name? Would the lake have a name? I'd imagine it wouldn't. I mean, to most people, they would refer to it just as the lake or the forest. But depending on where you live, they would refer to them as this forest or these hills or those hills. So maybe we need to come up with some names. Okay, so let's just name some regions really quick. Just make one more layer. So Dread Marsh, Mist-Ridden Woods. Ooh. The Shaded Woods. Yeah, I like that. Let's do Shaded Woods for that. We'll do the Shaded Woods here. Eurocentric inspired world. I imagine there'd be another name for the desert. That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, drylands could be something, you know, or the wastes. Yeah. Sandlands. Yeah. Yeah, there's other things we could do. The ocean, we do not have a name for the ocean. Since there's not multiple oceans, everyone just probably would refer to it as the sea, I would imagine, or the waters of the deep, or the ocean potentially. I think they would mostly just refer to it as the sea. Welcome in, Mir. The Titans Dunes could be good. Do we divide this forest into two across the river? So if you're talking about, or is it all the Shaded Woods and it just depends on if you're west of the river or east of the river? yeah, bays and headlands could have certain names. I think that's one where I would leave it mostly up to um, you guys per entry. That because there's probably an infinite number of bays realistically, not like literally infinite, but I want there to be enough that you guys don't have to look up which bay you're choosing to write stuff in. And then if people want to write more about that stuff, if it ever gets to the point where 150 people have written about this one bay, then we might just pick a spot for it and put it. But as long as you know, oh, it's kind of up on the northern end, excuse me, closer to the Isles, maybe we do that. Or if it's closer to the bottom, you kind of know it's like, oh, it's on the south of the coast. I think that's more than enough. Like I said, the people here don't know. They just know you follow the road north or you follow the coast north until you make it to the town named blank. And then you have arrived. Like, you don't know exactly where it is on the map. You just know you go out to the sea and you go along the coast and you'll find, you know, backwater, whatever. Sea of Stone. I don't know the JoJo reference, but I wouldn't be opposed to that. Deadlands could be good. All the Shaded Woods with different names for different sections. Okay. Yeah. I think that works because I don't want to make you. I think it'd be cool to have different sections of the Shaded Woods. Somebody mentioned the Mist. I mean, isn't the Mistwood? What is the Mistwood from? Oh, that's Elden Ring, isn't it? The Mistwood is over by Limgrave. I don't think there's any way that that's copyrighted. Not that we couldn't use it, just that that's what I think of. Lake. Deep blue. Yeah, water's the deep, deep blue. And I think depending on which culture or town you're coming from, they could have different names for the waters. Someone who lives up on the fjords might refer to it as more dangerous, or because they have like, you know, these negative associations with people who fall in, or these boats that get slammed up against the rocks, whereas people down by SpireHelm might just call it, you know, the ports by the sea, or they just might call it the sea, or the great blue, or the deep, the waters of the deep. Like, it just could be anything, and the danger doesn't start close to the shore, it starts once you get out into the deep. And I think people referring to ocean differently allows for people to write stylistically how they want within the world without being narrowed into, oh, it's called this technically, so you have to call it the exact name. But I think obviously the Shaded Woods, the Dread Marsh. Let me go through here. Where's mountains? Mountains. Let me just get rid of this bugger and put in, I think we'll do this guy here and these. I don't like that. Let's do this here. And then get rid of this guy and put a guy in here. That doesn't look like a gap. Let's just burn these guys out. So yeah, there would be a sweeping through there. We'll put a couple smaller guys here on both sides. I think it's probably more important on the top side. Just testing some things out here. Yeah, if I squint at it, it doesn't look any different. Let's grab these guys and just bump them up a little bit. That guy almost looks too similar to that. Oh, wait, I can't do that though. Okay, that's a little bit better. Maybe if we brought this one in here or something. I don't know. I think that's probably better. And then, yeah, you have the Dreadmarsh. Okay. Let me go back to this layer. Spinosaurus Lake Cannon. Goodness. Could work on a species of dragon based on Spinosaurus. Yeah, sure. Okay. Do we have... Let's go to lake and river. I have ideas for names for the lake here and the river that would run. I think there'd be lots of little rivers that run down the mountain of SpireHelm. I think when they get to the bottom, they would meet up. Maybe in a giant moat around the entire base of the city. That could be really cool if they all kind of, like, because it's basically a mountain, and if they all kind of come off and then they drop, you know, they have these waterfalls that fall into this moat. So you'd have little creeks that people could like get their water from that live in the city, and then it like falls off these waterfalls onto stone at the bottom, and then has this moat that feeds into a river. Fogvale is nice. Oh yeah, where was Fogvale for? Was that for something specific? John SpireHelm. Real. Lake, historical figure. Love that. Lake Varen. Varen. Yeah, I'm trying to think of... Yeah, I'm trying to think. Linguistic trickery. I'm not familiar with River Avon. Lake SpireHelm. Yeah. You could just call it Lake SpireHelm. You can also call it just the Great Lake or the Deep Lake. Or something like the Lake of Sorrows or the Lake of blank, you know, whatever people would call it, depending on if there's a positive or negative connotation with it. Oh, River Avon is redundant. I see. The Merfolk. Yeah, we could do that. Loch and Lake. Yeah, Lake Loch Ness. No, just joking. We could call it a loch. I don't know. Hmm. Thinking. Sorry, it's probably like just a lot of silence on this stream, but Dusk Lake, not a bad idea. Although Dusk would point that way. The sun's setting in the west. And then dawn would obviously be almost this way. The delta of dusk. Could be Noon Lake. Yeah, I mean, noon is going to be, yeah, somewhere between there and there-ish. So, certain names, slightly afternoon Lake. Certain names, certain words we gravitate to a lot when coming up with the names here. Yeah, there's a lot of similarity. Let me go quickly and see if I can. Just get some ideas from. How many of you guys are familiar with Mythic Bastionlands, the TTRPG? Let me know if you've heard of, read through anything related to Mythic Bastionlands. Heard of? Never heard of it. I don't know if I'm allowed to show too much. This is the quick start free PDF, so I'd imagine I'd be able to show it on stream. Um, it's a really, really cool. In my opinion, if I was to choose an RPG, a TTRPG to make SpireHelm for, I would lean towards Mythic Bastionlands as much as I would lean towards the big, Daggerheart, Dungeons and Dragons, Draw Steel. I love those for like their scale and scope and like how cool and how fun they can be. But for theme, Mythic Bastionlands happens to hit almost every vibe I like for SpireHelm. It's a little bit more whimsical and a little bit more traditional European kingdoms, knights, like really early medieval. Um, but the art style is really cool. The vibes of the world. Each person, you play a knight in the game, so each person chooses a completely different knight. So you have like the Tourney Knight or the Blood Knight or the Bloody Knight. You have the Moss Knight. You have the War Knight, the Willow Knight. All of these, you get this different knight, and they come with their own little magical property. And anyways, I really like all the stuff there. But on top of that, the idea of a mythic realm is perfect. There is this realm that you go through, and there is a kingdom, there's a castle, and I think 3 forts in a realm. And each time you play, you make a new realm, essentially. And there are these omens, or what are they called? I think they're called omens. No. Myths that you play through in the game. So a myth is kind of like an adventure, whatever. And each of these myths have different omens about them. And so I really like that theme where, anyway, it's hard to explain. If you guys haven't looked into it and you're interested in role playing, you should 100% look into Mythic Bastionlands. It is a really, really good touchstone. Probably one of the biggest touchstones for SpireHelm. I made SpireHelm originally, then came across Mythic Bastionlands and fell in love with it. I was like, this is almost exactly what I'm doing, just with a slightly different tone and a slightly different, scope and theme. But in a lot of ways, it's really, really cool. I was just going to look through and see if they have anything about rivers or lakes that I could draw some inspiration from. Let me look through what you guys are talking about, though. I'm not seeing much in what I have here. Hologlass Lake. Lake is bright red at dusk, so the red mirror. Ooh, I do like that. TTRPG stands for tabletop role-playing game. I think somebody mentioned that. But yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game, TTRPG. Pathfinder, Daggerheart. There's lots of really good ones out there. Lake of Myths. I like the red mirror as well. I wonder if red mirror is what people who live right here, right here would refer to it as, because every night the entire lake would just reflect bright red straight into that town. So if you live kind of on this western shore, then 100% you might refer to it as the red mirror, crimson mirror. Lake of Myths is good. Mirror of the Spire. I mean, yeah, I guess technically here you'd see the SpireHelm through the lake too. I don't know. We could also call it like the Lake of Reflections. If people, depending on what it reflects for you and where you live, it could, reflect the Great Mirror. Great Mirror Lake. Great Mirror. Is it the biggest lake? Yes, it would be the biggest lake and the one of maybe 2 or 3 lakes that we will have named officially in the official canon that people can use. Obviously, if you guys want to make more lakes, there's going to be tons of lakes up here. There's going to be tons of lakes up here. They're just going to be smaller. This one would be the one that people refer to. It has a river big enough that boats can go from the sea to the river, and this river is big enough that they can go pretty much up to SpireHelm's gates. on these two rivers, and then maybe another river here. So you have essentially four cardinal rivers that would go to this lake at least. Maybe this one kind of squiggles up here, but that it's that big. The rest of the lakes probably wouldn't have access for barges, but maybe for smaller fishing boats. You know, think like Lake Town, The Hobbit, how Bard has like his own little fishing boat that you can pretty much get all the way up to Mirkwood. Whereas once you get to Lake Town, there's like it just gets huge, and there's bigger boats. You know, like the one that they come in on Minas Tirith between Enoch's Gileath in Return of the King, with the Ghost Army. That river is like big enough that barges can go through. I think there's only going to be 2 to 3, maybe 4 of those rivers that a huge ship could come through. Dragon's Basin. Yeah, if there's a monster, we should make up a lake monster. 100%. I think there's probably lots of lake monsters. Every lake probably has their own lake monster. I feel like that's just what would happen in a fantasy realm like this. But I think it'd be cool to have one big lake monster. Maybe this lake. I'm trying to think, are there red lakes in the world? I know we go with red a lot, but like the red in this world refers to a lot of the red lakes in real life are shallow. They just have kind of like a red sand in them. But I wonder if like the stone on the bottom of the lake is red, so that when people look at it, they associate it with the Titans. I don't know if they associate it with bad. Like there's, you know, people drown in this lake because of, you know, this Loch Ness monster that we have here, or that people associate with death or something of the sort. Yeah, it isn't fantasy without ludicrous poison swamps. Exactly. Miyazaki would be so, yeah, exactly. Miyazaki swamp. Yeah, exactly. He'd be so disappointed at us if we didn't put a terrible poisonous swamp somewhere. Where that poisonous swamp goes, I think, is probably between the Shaded Woods and the Dread Marsh. In my opinion, that's where Caelid is. That is where the Lake of Rot. Yeah, Red Swamp, I think we go over here. Yeah, maybe we do that. So yeah, I think we keep it like a deep. Is Tahoe? Tahoe is super deep. Is that only how big Lake Tahoe is? For some reason, I thought Lake Tahoe was bigger than that. Oh, that's Tahoe. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at images right now. But I like the idea that this lake has its shores, but then like just drops. And people, I mean, obviously we're not going to come up with a canonized depth for the lake because, once again, they don't have scientific instruments. They have no way to measure. They have ropes and rocks, and they measure. They have a rope and a rock. They measure. They tie more onto it. They measure again. Okay, we can see the bottom. They measure again. They can't feel the bottom. They make the rope longer. They measure the bottom. They still can't find it. Make it longer, etc. They do it over and over and over until they realize this lake might not have a bottom. I think these people would mythologically believe that this lake has no bottom. It just goes down into the abyss. I don't know if that's helpful coming up with ideas, but Serpent's Basin. I like the idea of maybe, can we use the word abyss somewhere? The Merfolk adapted. Lake formed after the death of a dragon. Sunken abyss, not bad. Is the abyssal lake? Abyssal Lake is a game? Defiance of the Fall? Is that a Aaron Shore? I don't even know what that is. Abyssal Depths, is that? That's Risk of Rain. Another goated game. Hmm. I like the idea, Opus, with the dead marine life. Although because this is actually being fed so much, not that once again, not that we're going off science, but I think we need at least one living lake. I do like the idea of there being a dead lake somewhere, though. I would love for a dead lake to be up here. That's just, you know, completely dead. Abyssal Basin. I like Basin, although to me, Basin reads as something different. The Dragon's Abyss. I do like the idea of like a dragon being slain. That would be a humongous dragon, but according to, I mean, if that's the legend, who cares? I like the idea of the dead dragon crater. I don't know if it's Lithius or Ferillion or one of the other lakes. Dragon's Abyss. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards. What do you guys think? Put that there tentatively. Dragon's Abyss. And then I think we make it kind of resemble a dragon in a way. Like people would like get the idea that a dragon would, maybe that's probably not, it's probably a spine. Once again, it's a crater, so it's not gonna be perfect, but I wonder if we did like that. I don't know, is that kind of cheesy? You guys even see that? Sorry, this is like super light. Or maybe let's do if we did like kind of like a mouth, a claw, a claw. Like I don't want to draw a dragon exactly, but that's a terrible drawing of a dragon. Come on. This is not what a dragon looks like. I think we'll do like a snout like that. And then like that maybe. I don't know. Is that too fantasy-ish? Big three claw mark. Looking for lakes connected with rivers between. Could work. I don't mind that. Where's this? Maybe this one goes that way. These like branches of limbs that like could feed in like that maybe into the river. And then you have like this spin off here. Maybe that's, hold on. Because we want it to kind of almost look like a dragon, but only when you're like really squinting. Like we don't want it to actually look too much like a dragon. Otherwise, it's just kind of boring. It's a legend. It's like, oh, it kind of looks like a dragon, you know? I don't know. Yeah, I like the closed mouth look more. Yeah. I'm not liking that either. I just like the idea of it, the tail being where it feeds through into the river. Like that. But maybe that. I don't know. Is that esoteric enough? Is that too similar? And then you could have the wing up here lead out into the ocean. You could have one of these rivers kind of off this ice wall. You could have these rivers kind of come into his mouth. And then this one could go through the tail. Should probably do this on the other layer. See, like the tail could come through here into SpireHelm. That one could go out to the ocean. This one could kind of go up through there. And then maybe this one kind of accumulates the Titans, rivers, and whatnot. How are you feeling about that? Kind of looks like wings at the top. Because my idea right now is that it's the eye, the horn, the wings, the tail, foot one. Whoops. Foot one, foot two. That's what I see as the dragon. Is that what other people are seeing? I mean, it is upside down from what you look at here. That's kind of the idea. More serpentine for the design. You had to do no legs. Blue Dragon Lake, Portugal. Oh, Blue Dragon Lake. Interesting. Okay. I could see that. Oh, there we go. That's a good picture. So let's undo some of these. Go back to this layer. So yeah, I kind of like it. Not a huge fan. I don't know. This is stuff that I can also work on in my free time. But essentially, it's going to look kind of like a dragon. Yeah, so kind of like a serpent head with horns. There's going to be these kind of like shoot-offs. And then like this tail that kind of goes out through there. I mean, that's kind of, whoops. Are there dragons anymore? Yes, I would think so. You know, this is like super crude. But I think that's kind of the idea. Right? No, dragons aren't just myth. They do exist. I feel like in a similar way to magic, the stronger the dragon, the more rare. So there's, you know, these different levels and sizes and scales of dragons. So if the dragon is more powerful, then there's probably fewer of them. And if the dragon is smaller / could destroy a town, then it's probably understood to be true. Like you don't need to canonize every single dragon you invent. Like I said, it's in a shared fantasy world. So the shared fantasy is that dragons exist. They're dangerous, but they're rare. They're like the apex predator of the realm. They, you know, collect gold and power. You know, that's what they feed off of. So, okay, so we got Dragon's Abyss. Let's get to naming everything else. So I think we could do like a lake up here. And this one could be the Lake of the Dead. Lake of the Dead. And that sits in between these mountains and the Titans. I think that'd be really cool. Like a high up lake. I think Tahoe is kind of a good example. Lake of the Damned, Lake of the Dead, I think both could be used interchangeably, yeah. Are you guys talking Dragon's Maw for the lake, the main lake? Or are we talking Dragon's Maw for Lake of the Dead? part of the realm. Main lake. Okay. Okay, yeah, let's vote on the dragon's name lake. So we've got Dragon's Abyss. Oh, whoops. Dragon's Abyss. We've got Dragon's Maw. We've got, yeah, Drakefall Lake. And other mirror, part of the realm, reflections. Okay, that's what you guys think. I will be right back. I'm just going to use the restroom really quick and fill up my water, and then I will check that out. Okay, I'm back. Okay, looks like Dragon's Abyss is winning, but I saw a comment in here just barely that I like better. The Maw should just be the inlet, because if we've got this river running out of his mouth, then maybe we just the hear me out. Maybe the tongue of the serpent. So you have like this here. I mean, if we're drawing an actual dragon, this then slithers out towards the ocean, and then you've got this bit here. I guess that's a little, I don't know. And that's the maw. So you would, if you were talking about, you enter from the sea through the dragon's maw into Dragon's Abyss Lake, and then that's where this would be called the maw, this opening here of the lake. I think that's cool. Sending love from Zimbabwe. Sup, schmunk. I like that. And then obviously you have the tail you know, and then you've got this river of SpireHelm. Waters of the Deep is, I mean, the sea will be called by different people, different things, I think. So there is no official name for the ocean. It is just the sea, the waters of the deep, the anything you want. So yeah. Okay. Dragon's Abyss Lake. Let me add in here the Maw. Make Dragon's Abyss fatter. Yeah, this is all just sketching right now, so all of this will be much more prettier done eventually. We'll make it look actually real. And yeah, name of the ocean is a universal thing. Yeah. Or you mean the back of it thicker, like in here. Like that kind of thing. I mean, it's going to be a river or a lake anyways, so I don't know, maybe these little, it's like little exit, you know what rivers and lakes look like. And then this could also trickle in from above, all these little rivers that come through here. Okay. So we've got that. We have the Shaded Woods of SpireHelm. We've got the Dread Marsh, Dragon's Abyss, Lake of the Dead / Lake of the Damned / Lake of Death / whatever you want to call it. I could also see the Lake of the Dead being a place that they take. I mean, like the people who are killed by death storms, maybe they take them and dump them in the lake. And imagine a lurker that fuels off of all the people dumped in the lake. So it's like a lake monster lurker. So it can shapeshift kind of in a way and like manifest. I don't know. Maybe it's just a different monster completely. Maybe it's not a lurker at all. That could be cool. Bone Lake, yeah, anything with the Lake of the Dead. Okay. Plains steppe biome. Yes. I was literally just thinking about that. So we do have the plains and rolling hills up here. This is thought to be the like highlands, like the Scottish Highlands, Norse. These are kind of like the fjords up here. So all of that will be plains. What do we call this region? Lake Monster Lurker? Yeah, that'd be so cool. Trying to think, do we go to some of the gods? We could name things after the gods. However, the conduits change. Not frequently, but the conduits have probably changed a couple of different times, although they could be named after older conduits. Lost Lagoon for the Dead Lake. Lagoons are disconnected from seas and rivers. Oh, is that what makes them a lagoon? Because that could actually be cool. I thought lagoons were a larger body of water, a shallow body of water separated from a larger body of water, like an ocean, by a barrier such as sandbars, islands, coral reefs. Okay. I think it would be more of a lake then. Oh, Death's Embrace for the Lake of Death. Could be cool. Scarred Lands, I'm not opposed to that. Especially if we bring in, like, I think fjords are... Can't type. Fjords typically look jagged and scarred from above. So I could see that fitting in. So where's this? This one. Because yeah, if we brought in these and we made the upper ones into actual fjords, then you'd have like these break-offs that would kind of come in here and trail, you know, like that. And then you'd get like another one here. And like another one here. And that is pretty much canonically what fjords look like. So, Scarred Coast. I like that. Let's go with that name. Scarred Coast. Yeah, there is no god of life. Specifically, life is thought to be a domain of the Venerants, the good Venerants, and death is thought to be the domain of the dark one, the banished one. Felga is the conduit of nature, so she is the more prominent. She is the goddess of life, death, decay, and birth. So like that cycle. So yeah, I can see that. As far as the highlands go, up here we've got the plains. So I think like yeah, these bits start as plains. No, this is all. So the plains would go here-ish, I think, right? And then we'd have another forest over here. Is that what we had kind of decided? Have fun, Victor. Thanks for popping in. Fjords. Yeah, fjords are a bit more mountainous. Let's see. Let me go to maps here. Dragons taste like chicken. I mean, whatever floats your fancy. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I do. Hydras are, I think, I don't think we've 100% decided the lore on Hydras yet, but I think they're a little bit more like they're not part of the family of typical dragons. They're like a mythic, not mystic. Yeah, mystic dragon of sorts. Like their power comes from something else other than just nature. Like they're not necessarily a creature exactly. So, me. So, these are the Scottish Highlands here. They're kind of, I mean, obviously they're all through this region, but you kind of get these fjords as well that kind of pull through here, but you still get a bit of that highland coast. So I think for SpireHelm, we'd kind of, this Scarred Coast area would be kind of a combination of the two. You'd get Scarred Coast, some like not mountainous, but kind of like a steep coast, and then you get this highland kind of nature up through there, and then it would fade into plains and rolling hills. Yeah, hydras are magically altered dragons. Yeah, definitely the weaker dragons could be delicacies. Yeah, 100%. Some wacko blended dragons together to make hydras. Probably. I don't know which order of magic would that fall under. Is that alchemy or hematurgy? Or a combination of the two? I feel like it's kind of a combination of alchemy, like experimentation mixed with hematurgy, like sucking life like giving life essence to something. I don't know. And I like the idea of hydras being almost completely maybe the most rare of dragons, and like they can only exist if someone summons them or something. Alchemy and sorcery, yeah, could work. Wizardry, arcanism. I think it would break the laws of arcanism in a lot of ways. Yeah, I don't know. That's really cool though. I like the ideas, and maybe that's the mystery of the realm is that nobody really knows what the heck they come from. Okay, let's get back to this really quick. Guard Coast. Do we just call them the Highlands? I don't know. Is that too boring? Um, do we name them something like I don't know, Thamarian Highlands, or we just give it a random name and pretend that we made up a god for it or something, like one of the old conduits. Yeah, make up a god. Yeah, it could have been like an older god of nature or goddess of nature. Because yeah, right now we do have like pretty standard names, which I think helps a lot because the fantasy we're going for here is pretty standard. Like colloquially, like I said before, people call they would just call them the Shaded Woods or the Magical Forest or the Dread Marsh or the Lake of the Dead. And so there's only a few things that would probably be named 100% by the kingdom that they would say, this is what we're officially going to call this place. So, John SpireHelm's Highlands. Now that right there, plateau in the north being a continental glacier. I think it would definitely have glaciers in it, which would be really cool. Jotun's Peaks. Jotun from Norse myth could work. I also like the idea that the highlands and the rolling hills are maybe not the main, but probably the safest way out of the realm. Um, I guess there's technically we don't even know what's right here. Maybe I should expand the map to go down and figure out what's beneath SpireHelm. But I feel like the realms to the north, this is like your exit. So in a way, it could be cool to have like the highlands of Mountaintop of the Giants is Elden Ring. But something about like the highlands of something, something that odes to a distant land or a farewell or a departure, or not that there's no return, you know, but something similar to that. But they're also not huge mountains. They're not peaks. Let's see. The Highlands of Desertion. Highlands of Divergence. They deserted? No, not necessarily. I think there's probably civilizations up there, people that breed horses, farmers, um, stuff like that. Egress. Highlands of Egress. Is that one? Latin comes from ex gradi, egressus. Yeah, Highlands of Egress. Egressus is where the Latin root comes from, so we could call it, we could go a little bit more Latin, like some of the stuff in the archive and whatnot. Highlands. I've thought about doing some more Norse-inspired stuff, but I feel like the more Norse-inspired we go, the harder it is to stick with the dark fantasy, like traditional, like European knights and whatnot. It just kind of it gets a little bit harder to stay kind of on one track. If I was doing my own world, then maybe, but I think just it's a little bit easier to stick within the shared fantasy that we already have. The Moors of Egress. What does Moor come out? What does that exactly mean? Is it just Highlands? Is that just a synonym? Uncultivated upland. Yeah, Moor. The Moors of Egress. Yeah, I think we'll go with that. So we'll do the Moors of Egress. And I think those that leave the realm are not seen as deserters necessarily. It's just that because it's so far and like they don't know what's beyond the Moors of Egress. There's legend of giants, there's legend of other realms potentially, maybe an afterlife or whatever. I don't think it's common for people to leave, but I think that's probably one of the most common places to leave. So that's why they call it the Moors of Egress. Those that leave the realm, or maybe at one point, egress comes from not desertion, but an exit of sorts. Giants could be an occasional sighting in the realm. Yeah, I think giants exist. I think like the biggest giants would be kind of like the flame giant size from Elden Ring. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I could see giants being like hobbit size or like mountains basically that come to life. Yeah, egress means to leave. So maybe a people of a former age left through the north, through the Moors of Egress, and maybe that's why it's called that. And so some people follow their path to another realm. Maybe some people, I don't know. I don't know who. Maybe it was giants, maybe it was something else, but we can get to there when we get there. But 12 to 20 feet tall. Yeah, I think giants could get a little bit bigger than that. Yeah, I think giants could get pretty big. Once again, similar to dragons, the more powerful, the stronger, the bigger, the more rare. So lots of 12-foot giants I think are probably common. You could come across a giant in a forest that had taken over a fort. That's super common. But a giant that is like big enough to stomp out an entire town is probably super, super rare. I think that's just that's a pretty good rule of thumb for the entire project, I think. Yeah, lots of different types of giants too. Yeah, you've got like golems, rock giants, stone giants. I guess it's the same thing. Typical like woodland giants. Originate from the north? Yeah, I could see that working. Or at least a bunch of the dragon or giants could originate from the north. Okay, so we got the Moors of Egress. Let's go with these are hills. I think deep sea giants. That could be cool. Civilized giants and uncivilized, or ogres and cyclopses. Yeah, yeah. I think the giants that say work for dark forces for the Dark One are probably those like ogres and cyclops, and those that are unaffiliated or good. I don't know if giants, I feel like for a stereotypical fantasy, all giants kind of fall into the monster category. But, you know, could be more civilized in the north. Yeah, could be. Wanderer's Hills could work. I thought about maybe the name of a god of nature. Um, or this could be a this could be a very windy region, so we could do like the Whispered Hills or something like that. I'm not opposed to that. We could do Thelga. Um, yeah, Thelga's pretty cool. Or maybe we do the Whispered Forest up here, because if it's windy and you have this cold wind that blows down through this forest in the north, we could do the Whispered Forest or the Whispered Hills. I'm not opposed to either. Or the Whispering Hills. Or this could be called the Whispering Woods. I know that's kind of whimsical. It's an alliteration, but I don't know. Let me make a poll really quick. How do you spell whispers? I'm like, goodness. Okay. Let's see what you guys think. Because we probably won't use whispered 100 times. Not at least big world stuff. I think a lot of things would be called the whispered this, the whispered that. But just to get an idea, we can vote on which one we think should be the most prominent of the whispered areas. Wayfarers Hills could be cool. This could also be a place where the stars can be seen because you're up in the highlands. There's less atmosphere and fog. So we could do something with the stars, like the cosmic hills, or I don't know, that's kind of boring. I don't know. Okay, Whispered Forest is close, but Whispering Woods is winning out. Whispering Woods is overused, is it? It sounds catchy, so it makes sense. Whispering Woods, Westeros, Whispering Woods board game, horror novel about a family terrorized by a malevolent entity in the woods. Whispering Woods. What about the Whispered Forest? Okay, Whispered Forest doesn't exist. Whereas Whispering Woods, Whispering Woodlands. Yeah. Shaded Woods. Yeah, that's true. Hmm. Whispering Hills. Yeah, some people do like Whispering Hills. That one's not too far. Whispered Woods. Whispered Forest. I don't know. There's so many good. When is Tomato Town? Oh yeah, Tomato Town's right here. Yep. There you go. Just kidding. Um, man, I like the idea of whispers and wind. Maybe we could somehow connect the two if we did Whispered Woods or the Whispered Forest. Whispering Ascent. I like that one as well. Let's do. I think we'll do the Woods of Whisper. That's an interesting one. Or Woods of Whispers. You're joking. IGN just released a 22 hours ago Pacific Drive. What is this? Official Whispers in the Woods DLC release? What even is this? Whispers of the Woods. Whispers in the Woods. Woods of Whispers. Yeah, I think we do Woods of Whispers. I don't think there's anything out there. Whispers of the Woods or Whispers in the Woods is what I'm seeing most online, so let's do Woods of Whispers. Woods of Whispers. And then for the hills, Warped Woods is good too. Yeah. I had an idea a split second ago about the forest that goes through these kind of rocky mountains being something like a Sequoia National Forest, where the trees are just gargantuan. Um, you have kind of a maybe not rainy, I mean, a slightly rainy area, but like thought about calling it the Forest of the Giants, but then that kind of sounds like the mountaintop of the Giants, and then the Giants refers to the trees being super tall. I don't know. I like we can go off the wind. Sorry, that's just an idea. Put that in the back burner. For now, let's focus on these hills over here. I googled it. It's a Fortnite location. Wait, which one? The Weeping Woods, is that a Fortnite location? Morning Mountains. Shallow Spires could work. Weeping Woods. Okay, Weeping Woods is a Fortnite. Okay, good to know. I like the idea of these rolling hills also being windy. Um, you could do something like we could use breath, we could use weeping, we could use like the breathing hills could be cool as well. The fact that there's wind and it feels like there's, or the howling hills. I don't know how many alliterations I want. I think alliterations are good, but if everything sounds like an alliteration, if we have the Woods of Whispers right next to the Howling Hills, could get a little bit whimsical and poetic, I think, but at the same time, not opposed to it. So I think the Moors of Egress covers the hills and the plains, just like the Shaded Woods covers like the Warped Wood. I feel like the Warped or the Warping Woods could be a section of the Shaded Woods where you get turned around and like you don't know where you're going and like people just get lost. I think that could really work. And then the Dread Marsh could, obviously these sections cover the Woods of Whispers has its own subsections of whatever. Mounds of Murmur, not opposed to that. Wayfarer's Peaks. The only thing I have a problem with peaks is that in my mind they're hills. They're rolling hills. And so they don't have like hard peaks necessarily. How big is the Dread Marsh? Pretty big. Not tiny. Wayfarer's Hills, I'm not opposed to that. And then yeah, the Woods of Whispers would kind of go through the hills a little bit, and that would be kind of like your more Appalachian forest as opposed to like a rocky forest. Although the Shaded Woods, I think, is also kind of that Appalachian. I mean, that's more European forest, but not that there is nothing 100% reference, but just for the vibes. Wayfarers Hills or Wayfaring Hills? Do we do Wayfarers Hills? Is that what we're leaning towards? Hills of Wander. Let's do a quick poll. The hills Oh yeah, we also mentioned potentially if we didn't want to go with Wayfarers, we talked about doing something with the stars being visible, but I'm also not opposed to doing that somewhere else. Okay, I just put the poll up. We'll let it go for a minute. Wayfarers Hills is winning by quite a bit. But okay, Wayfarers Hills. So we'll do that. Wayfarers Hills. And uh hmm. The Wayfarers Hills. Do we just call these the Starry Plains? Or do we just consider all of this to be the Moors of Egress? And if it's not mentioned that it's something else, then it's probably the Moors of Egress. Like the Moors of Egress could cover technically all of this. I feel like that's kind of already what it talks about. Like it's just the plains area. And then yeah, you could have specific regions that are like the Starry Plains or something. Sky is so big, Plains of the Sky. Yeah. Starry Plains feels a little whimsical. Yeah. I think we just keep it just the Moors of Egress refers to all of the plains up here. And so you'd kind of have those would be the plains. The Woods of Whispers would kind of come through here. And then, or maybe it's more, the Woods of Whispers are kind of more like that. And then this forest would maybe come over here and trickle out into the moors. So, okay, Wayfarers Hills. Just realizing now that this is all here. Okay, now let's go to the Titans. Let's go to the Dreadmarsh and the Lake of the Dead and whatnot, because people travel through the hills. Who are we to get in the way of whimsy? Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some whimsical elements, but for the most part, we're trying to keep some of the dark fantasy a little bit more grim than it is whimsical, but not that there's no whimsy at all. Just the realm feels more grim than it should. Whimsical. Yeah, it is dark fantasy. Okay, so we've got a potential Lake of Dread, or not Dread, Lake of the Dead slash, pit up here, Pit of Doom and Despair. Maybe the Lake of the Dead is a lake within a cliff. What are those called? Names being land feature, buzzword is very amateur. It is. It is very amateur, but that's partially the point. If I was the one writing this as a fantasy series, I would take the time to flesh out a language, to have everything named according to like Lord of the Rings, how everything is named either Elvish or Dwarven or whatever. But the difference is this is a collaborative project, which means anyone new here needs to be able to hop in without having to know or read through everything to put stuff here. So yeah, like you said, there's no actual lore behind any of these places yet, unless the purpose is supposed to be placeholders. The people don't necessarily know that everything is shaped like a dragon. There are map makers, and they would probably do their best, and maybe it looked like a dragon at one point. Like I said, this map is not 100% accurate. And then, yeah, the simplicity of the names, there's going to be lots of races and languages in the kingdom at some point. So, can they see the lake from SpireHelm? I don't think they'd be able to, it'd be at like an angle. So they'd be able to see the lake from the top of SpireHelm, but probably not the shape of it necessarily. They are capable of making maps, but they're not perfect. They're not satellite imagery. But if you look at a, I don't know, 14th century map of Europe, I wonder what would come up. Yeah, like the maps of Europe in the 14th century are pretty accurate. Like they're not terrible, but like they have the right general shape of the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea and the sizes and comparisons of different things. 14th century adjacent, not exactly. It's actually I'm just throwing that number out there. I don't know, maybe 10th century is closer. I don't know. Either way, this is there isn't we don't have any 100%. It's a typical fantasy, but you get the idea. They can make maps. They're relatively accurate. They're not perfect, and also they're never going to be perfect because the realm is changing. So forests are changing in shape and size, especially locally. The smaller bits are of forests. Things that you used landmarks you used to be able to trust to know where you're going are disappearing or being replaced, and new landmarks are popping up. So that's part of that. But yeah, I think generally the names are going to be a little bit generic, especially for now, because it just needs to be for people to be able to jump in and write. If somebody has an idea, because once again, we're taking the inspiration from the AI dark fantasy trend on social media. That is where all this started in the first place. I know that's not necessarily what we're going after now, but that's like the idea. And so we're coming out of these things like Vermis, old school D&D, He-Man, the Dark Crystal, Willow, these old dark fantasy, this retro dark fantasy. And we're spinning it off to be modern. Obviously, we're not trying to do old stuff because that's already been done. We're trying to make it new and fresh and whatnot. But because people are going to need to jump in, they have this idea, oh, I really like that one, story, movie, etc., where there was a wizard in a tower in this like, dead marsh type of area. And then this hero had to save this girl from this tower and then bring her back to the city because he was like, the blacksmith's daughter was kidnapped by these goblins in this tower. And so if they have that vision, I don't want them to have to go, oh my gosh, this is this section of the world looks like forest, but it's called Mithrandiel. I don't know what that means. So then they have to go into the Master Lore document and read through a bunch of stuff and then find like, oh, here's what this translates to, and this wood, and they have to read and okay, this wood is actually more whimsical. Okay, well, where's the dark wood? And they have to go find which one feels dark. So in a lot of ways, this kind of gives you an idea. Oh, the Woods of Whispers. What does that mean? Well, it could mean that it's possessed, could mean that it's windy, different things. The Shaded Woods are dark, they're probably dangerous, and they're also in the shadow of SpireHelm. The Dread Marsh is dreadful, it's awful. So, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are going to miss out on some of this stuff just because they're not here right now. There are lots of people in Discord that have their ideas for different things. And that the main idea is just that we can all, like I said, we're all trying to add depth. The point of the creative writing coming together is to add depth this way, not scoped this way. So a lot of these big world things are things that, as great as there's lots of great ideas on big world things in the Discord, but unfortunately not all of them can be true and work at the same time. So there are some of those that'll just have to be, my decision or our decision for those of us that are in the live streams when I'm, debating it, or that decisions that are just made kind of on the fly based on what discussions are happening in the Discord. If there's something that pops up that's like, wow, that actually fits in really well, that one might work. And some of the people might have some really great ideas that don't ever become big world canon, and that's okay as well. I think the legitimacy and the implications going to everyone it shouldn't dictate how good your personal works are. I think at any given point, people should be proud of what they make and have other people appreciate it, regardless of whether or not it makes big world implications and full scale, like tipping the tables of the world or adding a new kingdom and stuff like that. I honestly don't want people doing too much hard work trying to develop a full like at the beginning, people were talking about doing their own magic systems and developing all these different things. And it just, I don't want you to have to do that kind of work because it's probably not going to work out in the end. And so if you're developing an entire language or an entire currency system or these huge big world things, it's great for world building and it's really cool to read about in a book like Way of Kings or Lord of the Rings or other fantasies. But here, the main point is to go with the small scope, the cool stories that, we want to read about heroes fighting dragons. We want to read about, you know, unknown knowledge being brought to light. And obviously we have the archive as a kind of frame to write within. But for the most part, that's kind of why, yeah, some of those things will get lost, unfortunately. And some people will miss out on some of the bigger world building stuff, but that's also okay. In the end, this is not to be like selfish, but in the end, this is kind of my creative project, and I'm hoping to do some art for it to work on portfolios and whatnot. But I just want everybody to be able to participate in it and give something of value that everybody can latch onto and just have fun with. In the end, is the point. And if you have more fun building your own pantheons and your own languages and whatnot, I'm not telling you can't do it. I'm just saying the implications in SpireHelm might not be as big as you're hoping for. Hopefully that's not too crazy. There's no anchor word to these names. I'm not sure if I understand that. Bloodless peaks around the Lake of the Damned. Ooh, that could be cool. Sample. Let's see. SpireHelm is strong as a name. I think I agree. And I chose it kind of because it fits that generic fantasy. Like it doesn't, it's a spire, but it's also protection. But helm is like a helmet kind of thing. I don't know. It's just the kingdom's name and the realm at the same time. People refer to everything differently. I'm trying to give you guys as much structure as possible to force your creativity into a certain box without limiting what you're allowed to do or limiting you to knowing too much, having to know so much before you can write or create or draw or do whatever you want. Okay, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. The Bloodless Peaks is not a bad idea. Trying to think. It's taking a lot longer than I thought to get through this map, but it's been fun. I'm having fun. Let's see. Oh, Lake of the Dead. Lake of the Dead for now. Bloodless or Bloodlust? Oh, I was reading Bloodless. It does kind of sound like Bloodlust a little bit. Temple Quarter. Bloodless, like there's not many living creatures there. Interesting. I could see that. Yeah, I imagine like the majority, obviously, of the life in the realm is kind of like a gradient. Lots of life, quite a bit of life, less, less. And obviously, anything behind the Titans is going to be like nothing. The Fae not having blood there. I have not kept up on the Fae too much in the Discord, but oh, a Fae world, separate realm. Gotcha. These various nymphs, different types of nymphs. Okay, yeah. Not a finished post yet. Yeah, it's totally fine. Yeah, don't worry about that too much. Names are also regional. Yeah, names can also be regional. But this is a fairly small region. It's supposed to simultaneously feel big and small.
Are there region names that aren't the north? What's the basis of this map? Pretty much nothing. It's just the realm at this point. There's no necessarily like geological location or size or scale. The map is SpireHelm, yes. So this is where the archive would be within this mountain over here, and the kingdom, the castle on the top, and the archive within, and the cities around, and then this would be the rest of the realm of SpireHelm. So, was this made from a POV of a collector, common cartographer? Kind of neither. This will probably eventually be the archive's map. Yeah, it's more of a meta map for you guys to use to inform things, so that people can write about, because it helps to know where you're writing things, not just the realm. I think the best stories come from nondescript locations. You just know we are in the kingdom, we are in the realm, we are in this forest, or we are by this lake, and you don't need a pinpoint location. Meta map just means it's above. Like meta refers to like metaphysical is like outside the realm of the physical. Meta map means like it's kind of outside the realm of what the people hear. Like I don't think anyone would ever see this map outside of the archive. So if this map does exist, it's probably one that is within the archive, and that's kind of it. So for most of the people here, they would have no concept of the scale, size, or even like differences or lengths of travel between different places. They would just know that to them here, if they were to sail across the Dragon's Abyss Lake, go through the Shaded Woods, and then they would make it to SpireHelm if they followed the river. And that's kind of like what they know. Wouldn't know where every single thing is plotted out. So. Okay. No, yeah, I appreciate the concerns. Yeah, I think bringing up stuff is really good. Helps us all get to a better conclusion. So, okay, naming stuff. Oh yeah, welcome, Denitus. We are kind of going through the map and just kind of trying to make the big stuff that people would be the most needed for creative writing or finding locations and stuff. We're not going to go much deeper than this. I'm going to kind of make it look prettier at some point, but this is kind of going to be the general place. We're kind of sticking to interpretable names for newcomers. We're not trying to come up with an entirely separate language. Like we're not trying to add, I mean, like Latin is kind of the furthest we're trying to push language in a way, but we're not trying to necessarily add crazy names of things that don't need to be named yet. I think at some point we might go back and maybe rename some stuff with the gods and whatnot, but yeah. Let's see here. But yeah, you can request a name for the forest if you have a cool name. Okay. So got Shaded Woods, Dreadmarsh. We need the desert, and we need these mountains up here that represent kind of the Rocky Mountain style mountain ranges with expansive, tall, I would imagine like a pine, like a coniferous forest, not a deciduous forest, where this would be kind of more deciduous trees and whatnot. Oh, have the map with nondescript names. Yeah, I think when I finish it, I could definitely drop a map with just the landmarks, so that each, theoretically, if you wanted to name things yourself, you could name them per language or whatever. Dunelands could work. Yeah, we could also just call it the Dunes. Wow, Duns. The Dunes. Since it's a relatively smaller region, people would just refer to that as the Dunes. Burgundy Forest on the north side of the Titans. Vampire Manual. See, Burgundy I could get behind.
Um, yeah, I think we just call it the dunes for now. And then at some point we can always add the dunes of something, you know. But I'd rather have those names where there's language and stuff built into them. I'd rather those be smaller area. Timothy Chalamet whereabouts, yeah. Um, so like for example, I did like the tombs of Thalar, which was like an art piece I did that I kind of connected to a theoretical, fort of wealth and this group of this family that had accumulated wealth, but then a death storm came through or something happened and they died, and so now they have this protector. So stuff like that, I like those type of names a little bit more. Red Sleep, the lake of something near times. Yeah, I think we talked about the Lake of the Dead being a red lake that's kind of infested with some sort of algae or otherwise that makes the water red. And I'm not opposed to this entire forest going from green to like a reddish as it goes towards the Titans. So Burgundy Forest could be a good one. It could be ironic to call it the Bloodless Forest if they're red, like they're blood red trees, but it's a bloodless forest, Could be kind of interesting. Could call it like, I don't know, Crimson Oaks sounds like a high school name a little bit. But we talk about, like, I guess, Crimson or Burgundy giants. So we talked about these trees being like the sequoias with like a redwood, but maybe with red blades or needles as well. I don't know. You're a villain, all right. Just not a super one. The Bloody Birches. Good work. Good idea, Schmunk. Skyreach could be cool. Could do like Cloud Piercers. I don't know, it sounds more like a Brandon Sanderson book in a lot of ways. Not that I don't like Brandon Sanderson, I love his books, but the Crown of Thelga. See, that could work. The King's Road. Not yet. Sanguine Peaks. Skyreach. Man, if skyscrapers weren't a thing, that would be such a cool name to call giant trees. I feel like that would be, if I lived in pre-skyscraper era, hearing the word skyscraper would be such a cool thing for a forest, the skyscraper forest. um, or maybe we call this region. So you know how we have the moors of egress, and we have the plains. We have the plains of Thelga or whatnot. We have these different plains, and we have the Wayfarers Hills, and we have the Woods of Whispers. But the Woods of Whispers trail off, and the Wayfarers Hills are part of the moors of egress. What if we had this region be called Skyreach, and within it we have the Skyreach is made up of the Burgundy Forest and these mountain ranges, the Sanguine Peaks or the Bloodless Peaks or something like that. But this area is called Skyreach because it is the one that reaches to the skies. These giants of forests and these huge, and they're not as big as the Titans, but the Titans touch the skies in a lot of ways. So yeah, Sanguine refers to blood. And yes, this would be kind of where the redwoods would kind of be. So let's call this area Sky Reach. And then we'd have these mountains, which would be something of the jagged peaks, the Rockies. I don't know. We don't need to necessarily come up with them right now. And then within them, we'd also have this forest that would stand as like a sequoia type forest, where it would eventually kind of trickle out into the Whispered Woods, or the Woods of Whispers, and the Woods of Whispers kind of goes down there-ish, if that makes sense. Does that kind of seem fair? Are we liking this? Yeah, we could do a community-wide votes for some naming things. I think that'd be really cool. Yeah. Well, I think that's a relatively good place to be at. I mean, it's not a finished map, so it'll take hours to finish. But in a lot of ways, I think this is good enough to use to inform people's writing for now. Obviously, this is going to be a slow project. It's a slow burn. It's going to go for, I don't plan on stopping this for a long time, so I'm not too worried about getting everything out now. It did blow up a lot faster than I thought, so here we are working on things I didn't think I'd need to work on for a while. But that's good. It's good in a lot of ways. I'm happy with where we're at with a lot of it. Peak shirt. Yeah, thanks. Battlefront 2. Best video game of all time. I say that for like 10 or 15 different video games. I'm not actually saying it's the best video game of all time. It's one of my favorites, though. It's like my favorite childhood video game growing up. If you're an OG. Blow up is still coming. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that first TikTok was something crazy, but I imagine as things get going and we get some really good stuff. Once I get some good stuff made, mostly. Once I get some really good cohesive art built for it, maybe a zine or something. I'm trying to come up with as much of the big world stuff as possible, so that it's cohesive and kind of fits all in this theme. Like I have the vision in my mind. I haven't had the time to go through and do the tones and tenets section. So, everybody has the same vision of the dark fantasy, but some people interpret it differently. And so my vision is one that's maybe a little bit different than some people's. And so I'm trying to do as much as I can to establish what makes this world a little bit different and isolates itself. I'm trying not to steal too much from the community so that, it feels like it's my world that anybody's allowed to add to. And like I said, we're adding depth this way. So like the prompts are a great example of that, where, I'm giving you this world event, and that comes from me. And I think in a lot of ways that is helpful for me to not feel like I'm stealing from the community, because I have a lot of ideas that I'm coming up with on my own. And where there's collaboration like these live streams, and obviously lots of people have had really good ideas, like the SpireHelm one that I don't know if you guys have checked out the highlight section today, but I just highlighted Midnight's work about the Storm Warden's journals. They are a A-list, great example of what a good entry and a good, when it comes to theme, format is fine. The little glossary section at the end, they're awesome. And he came up with the word Spirefolk, and I was like, why didn't I think of that? So stuff like that I'm totally fine with. But yeah, when it comes to big world canon stuff, as much as people want to contribute all of their ideas, it's just not entirely possible for me to A, keep up with everything and read everything, and B, it starts pulling the scope further and further and further, to where if I have to invent other realms and we have to do all that kind of stuff, it makes developing the world harder, because now you have to develop 100 different things instead of just 10. So not the same format as SCP, not exactly, not 100%. It's definitely its own thing. It's not necessarily, and I'll mention why. I think SCP, you have almost 100% free reign, and anything you add can be canonized immediately, because if you think about it, the premise is that you're doing these tests and clinical studies or observations of anomalies, and next to none of the anomalies will ever interact with another anomaly in a contradicting manner. So like you would never have a point where this one anomaly, because somebody invented this one anomaly, another one is now hindered. And I don't, maybe I'm not too into the SCP. I've taken a good look at it a few years ago, but in a lot of ways I feel like there's not a lot of clash that could happen. It's really hard because everything's so secret, and they're all in their own containments in these containment centers. And so you don't run into that risk. Whereas with SpireHelm, we're building a world. And so if one person makes their own, like, for SpireHelm, we should have orcs be this new thing, or we should have fairies be this new iteration of fairies, then if somebody else comes in here saying, oh, it's a dark fantasy inspired by the AI, I want to do something where, like, oh, I have an idea of a guy who meets a fairy and the fairy takes him to this cave and then he finds a treasure. That is the typical fantasy. But if somebody else has already invented something and has submitted it to the archive for their own class of fairies, now you see where that has to either be canonized by me or, you know, the arch chroniclers and whatnot, or you have to just accept that, like, it just gets hard. And so that's why I'm trying to give people a creative outlet, because I think that's what we all need and it's fun and we all love it, especially those that are in the Discord. There are some people who just want to follow along and see where the project goes, which is totally fine, and want to see the cool art. There's some people who are here just because we're trying to do it without AI, which I think is awesome. It's really hard because it's hard to make good art, as hard as that sounds. I'm in art school right now, and I can't even draw like Frank Frazetta. Someday maybe I'll be that good, but it's hard. But yeah, I think the different, the biggest difference is that we need some sort of central body to dictate what gets at least officially canonized. And I've kind of tried to say, like, hey, if your stuff doesn't, I would encourage you to write more stuff that doesn't need canonization, because that's what adds depth to the world. So if you think about, if I was to go into SCP, the stuff I wouldn't, quote unquote, be allowed to write about is, what's the, they have those like 12 or 10 or 8 people that are in charge of everything. They're the council or something. I wouldn't necessarily be able to just go in and say, I have an idea for another person on this council board, or a separate council, a different SCP group that tries to the O5 council. Yeah, I have an idea for a different group that also studies anomalies, but they're outside of the SCP organization. They're the FCP organization or something like that. In my opinion, that just detracts from the point of SCP. Not that it's bad, it'd be a cool idea. I'd definitely watch a YouTube video about it if somebody wrote some stuff about it. But when it comes to SpireHelm, it's kind of similar. If your idea is, oh, I want to write about a rival kingdom to SpireHelm, it's not that I don't like that idea. It's just that it kind of detracts from what we're going for here. And so it gets a little bit harder to juggle all of those different things, especially if you're a new person coming here and you're like, oh, I love creative writing. I haven't had something to creatively write about. I want to read some prompts. You come in here, you write some prompts, and someone goes, well, actually, you can't write about that up in the north because I invented a kingdom that's in the north and they own that whole land. And so it doesn't make sense for your orcs and wizards to come out there. You know, that just doesn't make sense. So I think that's the biggest difference. So in a way, yeah, it is kind of an SCP, but if there was in a way, a central body that has hard and soft canon and determines where we draw the line on things. And like I said, we've taken a lot of inspiration. All of the gods we did on stream. Some of the ideas were mine, some of the ideas weren't. I think most of the ideas that we ended on were combinations of everyone's ideas, so I don't think anybody can really take full, 100% say like, oh, well, that one was my idea, so it's mine. If you're worried about your ideas getting taken, SpireHelm might not be for you. This is a free use-ish place. So if you have an idea and you're putting it out there and you really like some magic system you invented, then you might want to make your own book or YouTube channel or something. And I'd love to have it be inspired by SpireHelm, or you're welcome to keep working. I'm not saying you're not welcome. I'm just saying if you're worried about your ideas, then you should make your own product because you can make some money off of that. But claiming ideas such as giants, that's the thing. That's kind of where it falls into what is the shared fantasy that we all know of giants. If you were to Google fantasy giant, that is what I would imagine exists in this world. There can be, we may go into some different lore when it comes to the origin of giants or origin of species. We may eventually develop certain things like that, or their affinities, their whatever. Just that the idea is that you don't need to know everything about SpireHelm to write for SpireHelm. You should be able to read essentially the overture page, and that's pretty much it. That the idea is it's inspired by retro dark fantasy. So anything you can imagine happening in retro dark fantasy, old school D&D, old school fantasy animations, and whatnot is what you would find here. Dragons, giants, ogres, orcs, heroes, knights, magic, wizards. So Yeah. Make sure you're not stepping on creatively on anyone's toes. Yeah, if you feel like you're having to scour the entire Discord to make sure you're not stepping on someone's toes, then there's a good chance you should just write about it anyways. And if someone comes to you and says, hey, you're stepping on my toes, we are already working on this, then they may be doing something that's quote unquote outside the scope of SpireHelm. Not that you're not allowed to, like I said, you're allowed to invent whatever you want here and throw it out here. I think any ideas are good ideas. Just that some of them may fall outside of the scope of the project that we're working on together. And so, yeah, if you haven't, so for like, oh, I want to do something with fairies, but somebody's already working on a bunch of fairy stuff, chances are, not that fairy stuff won't ever get canonized, but there's a chance that they're taking it in a direction that's widening the scope of SpireHelm, and so you just don't need to worry about it. Yeah, that's basically it. Don't worry about it too much. If you feel like you're having to avoid stepping on people's toes, just don't. Just go ahead and write whatever comes to you and what you think is cool. Contradictory ideas, different fantasy tropes. Can we choose what aspects we want to pull from? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, there's different fantasies. Like D&D is very different, but very similar to Tolkien, Middle Earth. In a lot of ways, the elves look similar, the dwarves look similar. They have, the dwarves have beards, the elves live in the forest, the elves have pointy ears, the elves live for longer. They don't live infinitely like Tolkien's elves, which differentiates them, but like the dragons are very similar. Smaug could easily be made into a D&D dragon. The orcs are very easily translated to orcs in D&D, and vice versa. So, yeah. Seems like it's first come, first serve, which is not super new writer friendly. It shouldn't. I hope it doesn't come across as first come, first serve. There has been a couple ideas that were pitched earlier on and have made it into quote unquote canon. For example, the lurkers. That one I worked on with Vincerus, who is one of my good friends that helped me make this project from the get-go. And so when we worked, he had the original idea for it and said, hey, what if there was these people that came from these Deathstorm Barrows? And I went, well, what do you mean, like zombies? And he was like, well, maybe. And then we juggled back and forth. And by the time he actually had written the thing, I already knew it would be canon because we had weaved it into the system that was already made. And I know that's kind of like an exclusive, like, unfortunately, I'm not, best friends with all of you, as cool as you guys all are. I haven't spent a lot of time with you, and we don't get to talk like every single day, So stuff like that, there will be some quote unquote unfairness where certain things will just make it and other things may not. But the idea is that it shouldn't feel first come, first serve because the world should already be built. The world should already feel like there's life in it, like there is a structure to the world, but that you, through your own smaller scope stories, add depth. Like Spunk said, I think depth is the advice for this project. If you think about the best fantasy stories, they don't necessarily come from altering the lore. Obviously, there's big examples like Frodo and stuff like that. But I think even you look at The Hobbit, and The Hobbit has its own story. The Hobbit could be reskinned for SpireHelm without changing any of the scope of the entire project. And if you think about the best stories in all of fantasy, they're all like that. There are very few fantasy stories that change the scope of a world. And I think because none of us do anything like that in our lives, and because stories are meant to be relatable, you're supposed to either be able to relate to a character or be intrigued or mystery, whatever it is. A lot of times we resonate with some of the heroes, and Bilbo's adventure out into the world is metaphorical for, doing something uncomfortable or facing danger, being courageous and sticking it out when things get hard. And so there could be a mountain in this world with a drake that stole a bunch of the dwarves' gold and usurped their quote unquote king or leader. And they get a group together and they go out and they vanquish this thing. Like the unexpected journey, the entire thing could be written for SpireHelm. And that's a great, and if you think about it, it would be a great story. And on top of that, it adds depth this way. Like I've been saying like depth versus width. It adds depth because it gives you, we have this mountain here now, or we have this story about these elves. And if somebody else wants to write about Durin, or they want to write about Balin's kin, or then someone takes that and goes, oh, can I write about Gimli's son? Or not Gimli's son. Glowin, I think is Glowin. He has Gimli as his child, and it's like, oh, I want to write about Gimli's child, and he's actually going to go meet up with an elf, and it's like, well, canonically, elves and dwarves actually disagree, so having them be best friends in this world is actually not true. That's what somebody would say if this was, Lord of the Rings. When in reality, you end up with one of the coolest stories ever, where a dwarf and an elf go on this long journey together and become best of friends. And you now have Legolas Dwarfkin, or doesn't he like change his name from Greenleaf to Dwarfkin or something like that, or Dwarf Friend? I don't know exactly, but like all of the best stories can be written within a pretty narrow frame. Obviously, Tolkien did the hard work, quote unquote, of developing the world, a long, extensive history and lineages that lead down to Legolas, that lead down to Gandalf, that lead down to Elrond and Galadriel and all of that. That's really cool. But for me, when I watched Lord of the Rings for the first time, I didn't know any of it. I didn't know who was related to who. I knew Aragorn was Isildur's heir, and that was probably about it. I knew he came from a descendant. And we have Farillion and we have Elithius. And we don't need to know yet every single king that came between Farillion and Elithius. We just need to know Elithius is the current conduit of light and the king and protector of the realm. And he's vanished. And that's all we need to know. So, yeah, I think hopefully this is, I don't know, is this point getting across? I love this. I love talking about this as well, because I think it's really helpful to narrow in on stuff. And I think, no offense, I would much rather read a story about a hero defending his small town from an ogre than I would about reading lore about how each magic system works. There are very cool things that we could come up with for the magic systems in SpireHelm, and we could talk. Somebody could make a spell sheet of every single wizardry spell. Somebody could compile everything together, and we could have a full master Excel spreadsheet that just has everything, every spell, what it takes, how long it lasts, its effects. That's cool, but it's not fun to read, and it doesn't add much. It doesn't add any more amount of life to the world than a good, well-written story does. And obviously, we're collectors, so we're collecting lost knowledge, which means we're not writing from the first-person view all the time, although you could write it from a journal. So all of that stuff kind of goes to prove that point. So yeah, I hope it doesn't feel like you need to be first come, first serve, because there's an infinite number of ideas, and all ideas have already been written about previously. Most of the hero's journey is the same. Luke Skywalker, Bilbo Baggins, Frodo, Aragorn, all of the best Dune. It's all the hero's journey. Can you write some stories as a novel or something? Yeah. Actually, if you guys wanted to write your own book in SpireHelm and publish it yourself and make money off of it, that's something you could totally do. As long as you don't market it as an official SpireHelm book being sold by me, then you could totally do it. If you guys want to make a graphic novel or something set in the world of SpireHelm or the realm, 100%. Yeah, we can demonstrate the way each magic system works through stories. Exactly. It's way more cool when you see a wizard do something cool wizard stuff. Like, especially if you think about the hard and soft magic systems I know a lot of people bring up. We're going off of a fairly soft, semi-soft magic system. We know where the magic comes from for each magic type, but we don't have any sort of, this doesn't exist in the world, you can't do this. I mean, we know there's some stuff you can't do. Like, there's no wizard that would be able to end the world and summon a black hole and devour the realm, because that would ruin the realm. So it's not going to happen. It's this fantasy, and fantasy stuff happens. It's not science or, super realistic. So, I don't know. Hopefully that's somewhat helpful answering some of your guys' questions. Letters and research papers about biology of fairies. Yeah, that's really cool. I think, yeah, you guys could totally do that. That'd be super cool. I think the fairies will end up being traditional fairies, small pixies to larger fae of some kind that are kind of whimsical in nature, possess some magic abilities, and what those magic abilities look like can be different for each person's stories 100%. I don't think there needs to be any sort of overarching top-down story. Like, the main canon is traditional, classic, retro, dark fantasy. That is the main overarching canon. There is no, you know, we are going to spin it off in small ways to make it unique and say, oh, SpireHelm does this differently. I think the conduits are a great example. We have big gods, but then we have the major gods, which are conduits for the venerants. So that's a way that distinguishes SpireHelm's gods from, say, I'm trying to think, Percy Jackson or something like that. Yeah, Death Storms are another great instance. I started working on After Effects from the Death Storm, but so someone else, and now we're collaborating, follow-up stories and documents. Yeah, super cool. I think the After Effects of the Death Storm could be widespread and could be interpreted completely different, because also remember, the Dark One represents not only death, but also chaos and unrest. And so he could manifest, all of his effects could manifest differently for each person. It's not like there is this is the only way that, actually, if he's not a lurker or he's not a specter, then it's not allowed. That's not true. It's just that specters are pretty common, and lurkers are pretty common. And that's kind of it. But if there are other monsters that exist, just that the barrows is what makes a lurker. And so you can make your own story for, well, a death storm came through and now the trees are evil and they're attacking our town. And so it's not a lurker, but it's a death storm after effect monster that's been created, and now it's, it has its own repercussions. So I think that's totally definitely cool. Live stream over. Can we talk about Dread Marsh a little bit more? Probably going to end it here in probably the next 20-ish minutes, I would imagine. We can talk about the Dread Marsh a little bit more. Somebody asked, have I been reading through everything? And if so, what's my favorite so far? I did just highlight the Storm Warden's journals. I really like just the vibes. They feel very, the format is really cool. They feel very on point, and they're ongoing, so you get like little snippets at a time, which I think is good, especially for community members who may not have time to read a full book from every single person in the Discord. And then I'm trying to remember, I've seen a couple that were really cool. Oh man, I'm trying to remember which ones. I've mentioned, I've kind of been in the comments of some of them when I get a chance to read them. I've been working on a lot of other stuff for SpireHelm, so I haven't had a ton of time to read through everything. But been reading through a lot. Thelga, major discussions about her on the Discord server. I have not heard about discussions about Thelga. Let me see. Gods of the Four Seasons. God of Light. I'm trying to find where the Thelga discussion would have been coming from. As far as the Dread Marsh goes, what were your questions with that? Who was that? AJ? The cycle of life. Interesting. Ollie, what about the cycle of life? Because you thought she wasn't created with much nuance to her. Yeah. Let me... Thelga. Very female, cycles of life, death, decay, birth. Yeah, there's not a ton of nuance here with her. She is kind of just a fairy female for the most part. I'm trying to remember if we had talked about her having different aspects. I think she's pretty bland, and artistry is pretty bland. I mean, not bland, but relatively undeep. A cardinal force? What do you mean by cardinal force? Uncaring and a force of nature. I thought we had talked about her being more archetypical as like she's more like the Fantasia nature spirit. Like this is kind of what I envisioned when I think of like the goddess of nature. And I know we're going off of like there's lots of cool ideas, but we are kind of in a way going off of not stereotypes, but like archetypes for gods. Um, oh yeah, the Dread Marsh not being bigger than the Dragon's Abyss. Yeah, yeah, the Dread Marsh is a smaller region. Sorry, this is totally off topic, but I'm just yeah, it's not as big as the Dragon's Abyss. It's a smaller region that kind of starts pretty dead and then gets as it grows out, it gets a little bit closer to normal life. Examples behind the descriptions. Yeah, it'd be probably a smart idea to do that. Give people kind of an idea of what to look after. I had envisioned that she represented because there is the un there's two sides of nature. There is the life essence of the world, and there is also the natural happenings of the world, like storms, fire, earthquakes, thunder, the oceans. I thought we had talked about the like fire. Oh, that's not fire. Where's fire? Fire. This represents the fire aspect of nature, the brutality of destructive aspects of fire. And the Dark One does have some power. He doesn't have his conduits, so we don't necessarily need a conduit for earthquakes, thunderstorms, and destruction and chaos, because that is those are the manifestations, or thought to be the manifestations, of the Dark One. And so Thelga in this sense represents, maybe nature is a bad word for it, maybe it's more life would be a stronger word, because yeah, nature covers everything, whereas she represents more the natural and living world between trees, creatures, bugs, fungus, humans, life and death, and the circle of life. Not necessarily that she is in charge of death, but that she makes life from death in a holy way, not necromancy, which would be like from the Dark One kind of thing. So should we just change it to the conduit of life? Yeah, the cycle is harsh and uncaring. Um, but I think that's why the nature, that's why Thelga would be not like an opposition to that, but the god of nature in this sense is chosen by the conduits to give peace with the circle of life, with nature, because nature can be brutal and death happens out of nowhere, and Thelga is meant to like help and usher in death, not usher in death, but guide those in death to a new birth through fungus, or whatever it is. Like, it's not that she's giving them like what's the word, reincarnation, but that's what my interpretation of Thelga was, although I wouldn't be opposed to do a double-sided. I mean, we have a lot of double-sided gods. This is both male and female at once. Leatris, the three-headed dragon, is also three forms. Muvea is an ever-changing form, and I think Lucian and Lucius are there's two sides. So I wouldn't be opposed to having the caring, peaceful side of life and the beautiful side of growth and whatnot, and then you could have another side of death, decay, and whatnot. A struggle. Yeah, I could see that. Growth often comes at the expense of other organisms. Yeah, yeah, there's always a fight in nature for survival. different sides based on the seasons. That could be kind of cool. Like maybe she's strongest in spring, and then her force weakens throughout the year, and then comes back the next year. Tree grows and casts a shadow on a sapling. Yeah, but I think in a lot of ways, Thug would look at it as like the sapling isn't necessarily being killed by the big tree, because as long as there's life, life is the good. That's how I would envision it. But some twins. Oh, that could be a different version. Since we have a lot of them that are manifest in two different ways, we could have one that is there are two conduits for nature, like Jesse was saying, one for life and one for the darker sides. Thug is starting to sound like the goddess of Moana. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean this is the most. I mean, obviously she's not this big. I think we talked about her being small, and once again, I think it could also be cool. Obviously, these conduits change. This is the current, quote unquote, current, as of 4600. So they could change, and you could have a conduit of nature that leans more into the brutal side of nature and not the life side of nature. I could see that happening. Dryad versus fairy. I don't know exactly. Oh, a nymph. Tree, fairies, broad term, duration, magical, otherworldly beings around folklore. Okay. So yeah, maybe she's more of a dryad then. Or a nymph. Worldwide. A single tree, if trees ever destroyed, the dryad might die with it. Interesting. That could be cool though. That could be cool. We do like a little kind of like a Gondor tree where there's like a tree within the castle, the kingdom of SpireHelm that's like that they're tied to, and when the old conduit of nature dies, they plant a new sapling. And as the sapling grows, they grow, and then I like that idea. Said Dryad last stream and I missed it. Yeah, I didn't know that's what the difference was. I mean, I know fairy. When I think of fairy, I think of like mostly Tinkerbell, but I guess Fae can refer to a lot more. So let's just change that then. Dryad female. Life essence connected to a tree in the capital. We'll just say capital. And the tree dies. Essence is connected. Okay. Is that feeling a little bit better? Not like Fae gods. I think we talked about Miris, the conduit of magic, being a Fae. Though it could be replaced. That could be a really cool another omen of the time to come, of the age of darkness that people are speculative of. If say for chapter N, chapter X, whatever, we get to a point where Aletheus is now gone. We don't know if he's dead or not, but nothing's been confirmed. There's no other god of light that's been appointed to the throne, so we assume he's still alive. And then all of a sudden, Thelga's tree burns, and we replace Thelga with a new god of nature that maybe represents an aspect of chaos and the unforgiving nature of nature, Yeah, in a new chapter she's replaced. I think that'd be really cool. I should definitely write that down for some realm events. Oh, whoops. Yeah, let me just go over here really quick.
Where did realm events? Okay, I think that will work for that. 100 years after the first death storm, yeah, could be a good time to do that. Yeah, something within there. The idea of Fae that we're working on is that they're alien and difficult to understand, though some have integrated themselves in civilization like true fairies and elves. Okay. I'm not opposed to that. I think what most people will write about when it comes to fairies and elves is going to be that traditional integrated into the realm, but I'm not opposed to their nature coming from somewhere outside the realm, or at least according to legend, their nature is outside of the realm, and those that can fully immerse themselves in SpireHelm become fairies or elves or whatnot. So that's how Faes are characterized in mythology. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad way to do it. What type of elves? In general, fantasy elves. Just the most archetypical, but that could also range from, I think elves generally are going to refer to Lord of the Rings style, D&D style elves. That's what most people will think of when they're thinking of retro dark fantasy elves. Children of Fae and humans isn't a bad idea. Not 100% immortal. We haven't 100% decided. They're much more immortal than humans. But I think the idea, AJ, is that the realm is so brutal that no one is immortal anymore. Not even the gods are technically immortal, other than the Venerants. But no one is 100% safe. So it's a little bit grim, but like no elf lives forever because it's too hard to live forever. So yeah, I think the generic answer is like Lord of the Rings, D&D elves, but you could also have elves that manifest more, or not manifest is the wrong word. You can also have elves that are more like gnomes and other, small Fae elves as well. So, like your collector be an elf that you can write for different eras of SpireHelm. That could be cool. Yeah, you could definitely do that where your guy lives for a long time. Yeah. Anyways, that's kind of most of that. I think we got to a better point with Felga. Hopefully that's a little bit more helpful, and we'll keep fleshing her out and the conduits and whatnot as we go on. Yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to get done on stream today. That is the map. I will post this in probably maps and probably in the maps section of the submissions. I think I have a map in there. Yeah, I did the official map of Spire of the Realm. I'll probably edit that one and put this one in instead. So it'll be there for anyone who needs it. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think let's probably plan on this next Tuesday around the same time. We'll go over potentially chapter 2, which will include hopefully the Ignis specs and some other cool stuff. But yeah, I think that's about it. Any other questions for me before I go? Happy? Excited? Motivated? I don't know. I'm always motivated and inspired after streams, so I'm having fun. I think we're making a lot of progress. Obviously, it's going to be slow. Mostly, just takes... what is the Ignis specs? The Ignis specs is spelled IG Ignis specs. Don't bother Googling it because it doesn't exist. But the Ignis specs is going to be a new flavor addition to the world. So it's going to be, think of it like in the same way that you guys are allowed to make your collectors, how there's like a blueprint to make them. Ignis specs are something in the world that you will also be able to blueprint yourself and make and or write about. So it's going to simultaneously be a prompt and a blueprint where people will be allowed to have free reign
It'll be like one of those. It's my favorite thing to add because it makes everything that you write about it automatically canon. You don't have to get approval from me. As long as you follow the blueprint that I set, it's going to be canon. It's going to be cool. And on top of that, it's something that will have large implications for the realm as a whole, meaning that it can be woven into almost any story or record that you come across. So yeah, sounds cool. I'm trying not to spoil this one. I really want to talk about it, and I hope that's what we get to do this coming Tuesday on the 28th, because yeah, if it goes how I want it to, if we have it ready to release, I can drop it, we can talk about it, and we can go crazy and design a bunch of cool stuff. So what time next stream? I think about the same time, like 11 a.m. Pacific time-ish. So roughly around there. Once it gets closer, I'll post it in the announcements. If you guys haven't yet, there's a new role that you can select for pings if you want to be pinged for announcements or canon like type events or just general announcements. There's a new thing for that. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys this coming Tuesday. And yeah, I'll post it. Yeah, I'll post like the day before or so, like sometime between Monday to Monday night. And yeah, thanks so much for hopping in, and I will see you guys next time.